significance of this vote?
Well, I think the point you made in your introduction is the main one. How did this all come about? It came about because a coup took place in Kiev. The Ukrainian constitution was trashed, president driven from the land, presidency set on fire, policemen killed in significant numbers, fascists on the streets, and their first act was to cancel the Russian language. So naturally, Crimea, which for 2 centuries has been a part of Russia, was given away rather capriciously by Khrushchev in my lifetime without consulting a single person in Crimea. The Crimean people, 97% of whom speak Russian, got rather anxious and began to look to protect their own interests. And for those who say self-determination referendum is illegal under the Ukrainian constitution, there is no Ukrainian constitution. It was destroyed in the coup that the Western countries helped to foment and certainly finance in very significant order. And of course, in Scotland in September, the Scottish people are voting, not the English or the Welsh or the people of the north of Ireland, just the Scottish, on whether or not they should leave the United Kingdom. It's good enough for them, it's good enough for the people of Crimea.
Okay, Dmitry, how would you react to what George had to say there? Because, you know, Washington says it's illegal, it's illegitimate, etc., etc. I can remember Kosovo, though.
Well, I would say that still it's a pretty risky move on Russia's side to support this referendum. And, you know, most of the political observers here in Moscow were surprised when the steps were taken in that direction in the end of February. But if you look at this situation from a Russian perspective, it would look rather naturally. I mean, since 1988, Russia has been making concessions. We gave up our positions in Central Europe. We allowed NATO to expand even into some former Soviet republics in the Baltics. So Ukraine was like the last straw that broke, you know, the back of a camel. Something had to be done to show the West that it cannot indiscriminately and without any risks moving its military machine closer and closer to Russia. I mean, Sevastopol as a NATO base is an absurdity. Anyone knowing history knows that Russia did not give up Sevastopol even in 1855 when the fleets of Great Britain and France were bombarding it for months. So obviously this is the first time that Russia really took a stand, and I would say that the place is chosen not because of international law or geopolitical considerations. Probably it would be easier to apply pressure on other countries, but in Crimea, indeed, the majority of people want to become citizens of Russia, and the West should ask itself the question, how come this happened? These people lived in independent Ukraine for 25 years, and still they didn't become in any way closer to Kiev. I think the reason is because they're afraid that the new government in Kiev is actually building an ethnic state. This is something that they cannot accept in Crimea.
Michael, it's in Western media, they just don't like to talk about the composition of this government in Kiev, the fascists, the ultra-nationalists. Explain to me why you think that's the case.
Well, I think that's the case because there's a natural bias in the Western media against Putin and Russia. Even, you know, what's concerning, it's not only on the American right. I mean, Fox News, you know, that's predictable. But the American left, publications like the New York Times are, you know, either they're glossing it over or they're outright criticizing it. They're calling it propaganda, and they're overlooking the facts. And the facts are neo-fascists have and ultra-nationalists have filled a number of top ministry posts. And what's ironic is the Europeans and the U.S. years ago said these parties did not reflect Western values. And now they're all about it. You know, it's like yesterday they were our neo-fascists. Today, you know, they're evil. Kind of like the Taliban were our terrorists before 9/11, and now they're evil. It's just amazing. It's just wherever the wind blows, that's what the U.S. position is. Whatever the U.S. says at the time, you know, depending on the position, depending on their interests, that's what, you know, their stance is. So it's just remarkable. Like, you know, in my article I say, Google Ukraine and neo-fascist or neo-Nazi, and it, you know, eventually you find an article, like the State Department didn't have to do a lot of research, yet they categorically denied this in a statement, a top 10 list kind of mocking Putin. And it is just, you know, it's egregious. It's kind of hard to believe that they would point blank just deny that ultranationalists are occupying the top posts.
George, if I can go back to you in London, I think what's really quite remarkable from a Russian perspective is that there was an agreement on the 21st of February. It was a compromise. Everybody won something and no one lost everything. And then the EU walked away from it, and we had Victoria Nuland's coup pulled off here. No wonder Russia doesn't trust these people.
Well, quite. President Kennedy, God rest his soul, was ready to take the whole world to thermonuclear war to stop the then Soviet Union having missiles on Cuba, 90 miles away from the coast of Florida. Yet they imagine that Russia will accept the ever onward march of NATO. And everybody knows that the kind of regime we now have through the coup in Kiev, the next thing they would do after the IMF and the EU would be to invite NATO to the very borders of the Russian Federation. And anyone with any sense would know that a leader like Putin, who's nobody's pushover, everybody knows that, would ever accept that. So Russia is now attending to its absolutely legitimate security and economic concerns and the responsibilities that it has to ethnic Russian people. I mean, the United Kingdom sailed 7, 8, 9,000 miles to the South Atlantic to come to the aid of 2,300 of people who claim to be our compatriots and fought the Falklands War. How much more pressure is there on a Russian president to defend his compatriots on the very borders of the Russian state?
Yeah. Dima, what about the south and east of Ukraine after this referendum in Crimea? What's your crystal ball say?
Well, I hope that basically Crimea is a special case, and I see a lot of complications for Russia and for the West if unrest in the eastern parts of Ukraine becomes violent, and at a certain moment Russia will be forced to intervene. I think it's not in the interest of Ukraine, it's not in the interest of the West, it's not in the interest of Russia. And I hope that the government in Kiev has some wisdom, and they won't just arrest the leaders of popular movements there, because, okay, they arrested this so-called people's governor of Donetsk, but then he will be done just replaced by some other enthusiast. So this is not the way to treat opposition, we know it. But you know, the problem with the Kiev government, the West says, oh, they made a mistake cancelling the status of Russian as a regional language. Oh, they made a mistake by taking the members of the Svoboda party into the government. Svoboda initially was called National Social Party of Ukraine. You understand that this is a euphemism for National Socialist Party of Ukraine. But I would say that this reminds me of Soviet mentality. They always said that Stalin made mistakes. The nature of Stalin was criminal. In the same way, I see a lot of people in Batkivshina, I see a lot of people in Udar who are also die-hard extremist nationalists, and this is the nature of this regime, to cancel the status of Russian language in the regions, or to take ultra-nationalists into this government. This is no mistake, this is their character.
Okay, Michael, let's focus on the State Department here. What were they thinking? What was Victoria Nuland thinking? That she's going to pull this off? I mean, it's really amateur behavior. I've never seen such amateur behavior in foreign policy in my lifetime.
And I have to say, admittedly, I was a little shocked that, you know, she did this. She used to, you know, seem like a professional when she'd do the State Department press briefing. She always carefully, you know, chose her words, and for her to do something so undiplomatic, but then again, you know, her fingerprints were kind of on Benghazi as well. So, you know, it's unbelievable. She's married to a neocon, you know, that's got to be stated too. So maybe that's where her mindset is. And, you know, some of her radical views came out. But it was disappointing, you know, when you cover the State Department and there was a, you know, the press even respected her. And, you know, it's just very, like you said, it's just mind-boggling. But, you know, she's representing John Kerry's ideas. And I don't know what happened to Kerry over the past 2 years. He has Lindsey Graham coming up to him saying, hey, buddy, can I help you out there?
Go ahead, George, before we go to the break. Jump in, George, before we go to the break. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, isn't she representing John McCain's ideas? I mean, the Obama administration hasn't had a firm hand on this. The pace has been set by McCain and by the neocons of the Bush era, and Newland is one of those. She's got a dirty mouth, we know that, what she thinks of the European Union. We now know she was giving out $50 a day, which in Kiev is quite a bit of money per day, to the thugs on the street that destroyed the Ukrainian constitution. So I don't think we can exculpate the Obama administration from this. If this is what's going on under their watch, they're responsible.
All right, gents, let me go. Let me jump in here. We're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on Crimea. Stay with our team.